All right, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Mental Health Mondays. I am Mindrunner, but I'm also known as Mulder to my Scully, who is my co-host on several endeavors on social media. She is also the co-host for the one of the coolest podcasts on there with her host friend Devin. There's also she's an avid fan of the show Reacher, which I would like to talk to her more about, which Deb and I have been really excited about. And she is not only a NASCAR enthusiast, but she is a pro wrestling super fan. She is the notorious villain herself, Miss Courtney the Queen. Hello, Courtney.
Hi, Mulder, aka Mine.
Yes.
How you doing today?
Doing great. It's cool. This is gonna air on Monday. We're recording it Sunday. Doing great, having a very relaxing weekend. Just to let everybody know, you and I kind of the nickname Scully there. That's the combined. Scully and Mulder comes from, of course, the X-Files, and the two of us kind of being the truth is out there tag team detectives. And it's been a lot. I've been excited to get you on Mental Health Mondays. Those of you familiar with the Educators Podcast, remember that I've had Courtney on for educators, and we definitely still want to talk a little bit about that. But Courtney, you are one of the sources of positivity, even though it's in a very snarky, I want to say comic book villain-esque, sarcasm. But I think that's endearing. And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about again is just kind of both maintaining your personality online, but also having fun with it too, and making like Twitter X and other platforms a better place. But anyways, thank you for being here. Glad to have you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah. Let's dive right into it, shall we?
Yeah, exactly. Now, you and I kind of have met through a couple sources. I mean, I'm a co-host on Dynamite Download. You've helped us out with Dynamite Download, but also through our friend at Top Rope Squishy, Maddie. And our circles have overlapped in several areas.
It's just meant to be.
Exactly, Scully, exactly. But the thing that's interesting, what I enjoy about you the most is you don't seem to really let social media affect your demeanor or personality. Like, you have kind of it's hard for a lot of us to have that no BS. Like, you almost just drive past it. Any hate or negativity, you just kind of drive by. And what are your thought processes, and how do you avoid negativity on social media like you do?
Well, for one, I'm not on X like all day long like some people are.
Yeah.
Constantly on there, constantly. I'm just mainly pushing our podcast out there, pushing y'all's podcast, helping y'all out when I can, and just like if somebody's negative and you see it and they're not close to you, just go ahead and hit that block or mute button, because it's very useful tool.
Yeah. I prefer mute for most folks. I'll use block like if they're clearly like a bot, or they're going to try to add me to a list or try to spam me with something in DMs. But most of like the real haters, I just mute, because I feel like sometimes there's some folks out there, and maybe you've seen this. Have you seen people that they almost they go out of their way to start trouble, and it's almost a reward for you to block them, because then they can say, hey, look, this person blocked me. I almost don't even want to give them that credit.
I don't either. That's why I just like, if I see negativity, I usually, and if I'm not involved, and I try not to get involved, because I've grown so much as a person to look past the negativity. And like our podcast host Devin, he seen me grow as a podcaster, and you've seen me grown
Yeah.
as a podcaster, and
Hmm.
having that positive mindset, even though like maybe you had a down day yesterday, but today is going to be much brighter because you're making somebody's day by making them smile or laugh.
Yeah. And that's important too. I do want to talk about the importance of levity, but it just seems like, personal growth too. It's tough to not. It's tough to ignore when somebody's being hateful, especially if they like if you like. I always joke about, like, I'll say I like apples, and then someone's gonna reply, "Well, then why do you hate bananas?" You know what I mean? Like, I didn't say that.
Exactly.
But walk through a little bit about your own personal growth, not just with social media, but kind of where you are today versus like 5, even 10 years ago. What would you say to the Courtney of 5 years ago? What if you could say anything to her?
What would I say to myself 5 years ago? Probably that you're gonna do stuff that you didn't think you were gonna accomplish in life. Um, I never thought like doing podcasting would lead me to like great friendships with you,
Hmm.
Squishy, even Devin, Art, and Dynamite Download, just
Yeah.
to drop a few people who are important to me. And you're gonna be there. You're gonna go through some rough patches, but you're never gonna give up at all because you see pushing forward, just pushing through that negative wall or punching it out sometimes helps. Like punching
Yeah.
bags. Like
Yeah.
just use your different tools. There's a lot of tools out there, but yeah, I mainly just ignore the trolls.
Hmm. And
And
that's
I try not to get involved if I can. Like, but if they're coming at me disrespectfully, you better believe I'm gonna block you in a heartbeat.
it's like talk to the hand,
Yes.
talk to it. But that's cool too. And, I think what's important for a lot of people to remember, and this is my own life experience too, is you have no idea what's around the corner. You might be in a dark place right now, but you have no idea what gifts are waiting for you just if you keep stepping. I had Deb Housen from Nation's Corner on a while back, and we were
Mhm.
talking about Dustin Rhodes has a saying, keep stepping.
Right.
And one of my favorite movies, and Deb House, not to be confused with Full Tilt Deb, my wife, Deb Housen from Nation's Corner, two different Debs, but Deb is such an awesome name. But we all like the movie What About Bob, and in there one of the jokes is the baby steps in there. So we came up with keep on baby stepping, taking both sayings and putting them together. But I think do you agree it's important for people when you're in a real dark place, and it's easier said than done, just to keep stepping, try to just to keep moving forward because you have no idea what tomorrow might bring, right?
Right. Absolutely. You definitely don't know because we don't know if tomorrow's guaranteed or not. Not.
True.
So the reason I pull myself out of the dark places is because I got so many people counting on me, and that's why I try not to lose myself. A lot of people have lost their who they are through social media, and I'm sure
Yeah.
you've seen that too.
Do you think that some of it is like, does social media set people up for like a false sense of
A false sense of maybe validation that they're
yeah,
looking for.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, like
I absolutely do. Like there's some good things about social media, and then there's some horrible things about social media, like the bullying and all that. Hey, grow up, be strong, and just push through.
yeah, there's a dopamine effect when, I mean, I'm human. I like it when I'll put a post out there and it gets a bunch of likes. It makes me feel good. I'm like, yeah, all right. and conversely, if I put a post out there that I think is funny or valuable
Hmm.
and it doesn't get any reactions, I feel a little sad. And it's weird because for that to affect me, I need to just shrug it off. And I think that sometimes when it's dangerous because you could become a person who's letting social media, your number of likes and retweets, be your source of validation. To me, that seems dangerous. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree to that because validation should actually come from a person you know, or
Hmm.
say, like sometimes I say, "Hey, mine, you're doing a great job," or "Mulder, you're doing a great job. Just want to stop by and tell you that." You know what I mean?
Yeah, but coming from you, coming from people that you know, it
Yes.
to me that's more valuable. Like when I was a
Yeah.
teacher in the classroom, getting an evaluation from somebody that has only seen me teach for 20 minutes
Right.
versus getting a hey, you did a great job from a coworker who's seen me teach every day. To me, the second one is more valuable. Getting a
Yeah.
compliment from you, getting a compliment from the other Dukes of Dynamite, from people that I respect,
Right.
to me versus just generic validation. I kind of go. I'd rather have 100 people on Twitter or X that I interact with in a positive way than to have a million people that I barely interact that don't know me at all, like barely interact with. Does that make
Right.
sense?
That makes perfect sense. And
Yeah.
to bounce off that is like, yeah, validation, it's all right and everything, but you really don't need it to strive.
Hmm.
You need a more positive mindset. Just kind of like maybe looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, having a whole conversation with yourself at some point. No, we're not crazy. We're just trying to lift ourselves up.
Yeah.
Is
There's
basically
power in words too. Is it? I like Bruce Lee's comment. He says the he says words are powerful. That's why that's why wizards cast spells, because he used the word spell, but like words are powerful. I think sometimes language is thought, and sometimes saying things out loud to yourself can be more powerful than just thinking. I see that as something that it's a good way to get yourself out of darkness. But the flip side is, and this is something I'm dangerous of, I have to fight constantly. You could also talk yourself down constantly, and that's something you've got to be careful of, like
right.
going, "Oh, you stupid, why did you do that?" You have to learn to laugh at yourself, and you have to give yourself some respect and some slack for being human. Would you agree?
Yes. Also, you have to give yourself grace. That's
Yes.
a lot. A lot of people don't give themselves enough grace.
Mhm.
Like, when I say, I barely tell myself anymore I'm stupid, because I'm not. I'm
Yeah.
actually really, really smart. So uh, just be. My advice to the people out here listening is just be your authentic, genuine self. Because
Yes.
social media has gotten so negative and like woe is me and stuff like that. You don't need that in
Mm-mm.
your life.
I I went for years, and some of this is like with my dad. My dad had a lot of high standards for me, and like he had like a list of things he felt like I should accomplish, and it took me a while to realize he was kind of living vicariously through me. Like he wanted me to buy a Jeep, and I didn't like Jeeps, but he kept pushing me to buy a Jeep, and that was kind of the straw. But I think what it took me a long time to realize that when you're your genuine self, the people that like you for you. When you're pretending to be somebody in order for people to like you, they're not going to get to know the real you. You know that, and then you start to live this constant lie. You know, for a lot, this is something that's really funny. Is I'm not as much into football as my wife Deb. In fact, I mean, I kind of vaguely will follow some teams and players every now and then, but I really don't get into football. Yet, all growing up, it was assumed because I played football and I was a guy that I was into football. Conversely, Deb, who is one of the most prissy, she's one of the most definitely feminine women on the planet. I mean, she's nail polish and flowers, and when there's a cockroach, she's like this. But when she talks sports, she's all sports. She's like, well, the Chicago Cubs are gonna do this, and the Bears suck this year because they should have drafted this guy. And she has all this knowledge of sports. And what was funny is we went to dinner one time, and the manager, it was at a steakhouse, and the manager came out to talk to us, and immediately started talking to me, almost his shoulder to Deb, started talking to me about about football, and I'm just nodding. And then all of a sudden, Deb just starts jumping in and rambling about sports, and he looks surprised. But I think that for years that was hard for me to not just be myself and say, listen, I'm pro wrestling I like, but I'm not as much into that.
Right.
How important is it to be your genuine self? I mean, is it important to be genuine and honest with yourself? And where's the line? Is there a point where you need to sacrifice honesty for respect, or is there ever a time where being dishonest with somebody is a problem? I mean, is acceptable?
Not in my book, because I'm a brutally honest person.
Yeah, you are. That's the truth.
That's all truth here.
Don't apologize for that, though. That's one of your endearing qualities.
I don't apologize for my brutally honest self. To me, honesty is the best policy. It gets you far in life, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I always try to be upfront and 100 with everybody I come into contact with. Like, for example, like, let's say Devin, who's on the podcast with me, he likes Roman Reigns. Me, I'm not a fan of Roman.
You're not for the Chief, huh?
but we have fun at what we do, and
mm-hmm.
just being positive together is like a cohesive thing. I would say a teamwork thing. But it all comes back to that manifestation and mindset too.
Tell me a little bit more from mindset, because a lot of people say mindset is important, shifting your mindset, but sometimes I hear that and I'm like, okay, that makes sense, and then sometimes I hear it and I'm like, what? Like, how? That sounds easier said than done. How do you shift your mindset to better yourself?
Oh, that's a tough one, but
yeah.
I think I got it. All right.
Okay.
So a year ago, my dad wasn't doing so well, and he was in ICU, and y'all passed away. So I went through a dark 2 months, and I just eventually, I guess I woke myself up. Like, you can't do this. You will get through this. Like, if you constantly think that you will get through something, you will. And just like I said earlier, I have more to live for. You know what I mean? So that me out the dark space, and also podcasting has helped me tremendously while I'm going through this with what I'm going through with my dad.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Finding something to do definitely helps. And do you think sometimes it's that people could get comfortable with depression? or they almost like they're afraid to leave it because they're it's comforting in a way.
I would say yes, and I would say you can beat the depression.
Hmm.
It's very important for you. It may not seem like it makes sense, or it may not seem like, oh, I'm in a dark place, but I don't realize it. But once you realize you're in a dark place, you take those steps to change your day. Like,
Hmm.
it was really, really hard for me to just, it was really hard on me, especially because I have like health issues. And um, during that time, I was not nice to my body because I was eating the things I wasn't supposed to eat, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I know that. Comfort food. I mean that. I mean, let's be honest. Comfort food. That yeah, a dozen donuts from Krispy Kreme can temporarily get you through a sad time, but
Yeah.
not long term. You're not going to feel very much very. You're gonna have some real dark thoughts after that sugar rush drops.
Oh, yes, you.
So what were some of the things that you did to get yourself out of that funk? And what were some things that how did you change your mindset to get out of that dark time? And do you
Um,
still do that? Or is this a constant ongoing thing?
well, how I got through it, like I had like friends like Squishy and you, like helping me through it
Hmm.
when you, without you guys realizing you were helping me through a rough spot. So yeah, and then that's how I became friends with some of the doctors where my dad goes to the hospital at,
Hmm.
and some of the nurses. Like one nurse in particular, her name is Courtney too, so I call her my twin sister. We just had this sister vibe ever since we met, and so
Hmm.
she helped me, and the um the doctors would be like sit beside me because they knew it was rough for me to see my dad like that.
Yeah.
But somehow, with them behind me and all my friends, I beat it in a way, I guess,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
It does. It does. And it's one thing to. I always battle this thing where you can't find success in this world by yourself. You've got to find a support network to help you because you can't do it alone. On the flip side, though, is there's also there you need to be there's a bit of self reliance that needs to happen. You can't become codependent on others, for your own happiness. You've got to do the work.
Yeah,
And I think that's kind of that line that sometimes that we can all fall one way or the other, where we become so like no one's gonna help. I can do it myself. We get this tough guy or tough gal mentality, and I have relatives that do this where I'm gonna. There's nothing wrong with me that I can't fix myself, and then they just collapse because they burn themselves out. And then
right.
the flip side is there's people that almost become too dependent on others to lift them up. I see this on social media. Yeah, I sometimes people make these posts that seem like a cry for help, but it almost is like they're begging for attention or likes rather than really trying to do any work themselves. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does, because you're right, because you have to work through the dark times. Even if
Hmm.
you don't want to face the dark time, the dark time will come, but you will overcome the dark times.
And how important, like, again, regardless of religious beliefs, though, but do you feel sometimes there's a divine force at work as well?
Yes, I do. Like I do believe the divine force was chose us to go through this as a family.
Hmm.
Because we didn't know all this stuff was going to go down. We didn't know that he was going to end up in the ICU for 2 months. And then, I've always been the strongest in my family. My dad's family always said since I was little I was the strongest. So I really don't show my emotions like I should. What
Mm-hmm.
happens is I wait until it bottles up and then it explodes. But
Mm.
I'm getting better at that.
That sounds familiar. Yeah, you don't want to you don't want to bottle everything up because you're right. What happens? It comes all out exactly.
Yeah.
How do you manage your emotions now versus before?
Um, I just let it flow, if that makes sense. Like it took a while because I didn't understand or know exactly why this happened, and I
Mm-hmm.
know we're not supposed to ask the divine forces why stuff happened. We're just supposed to go through it and learn from it.
How has this shaped you and made you stronger or a better person?
I think just recognizing like that it's gonna eventually be okay. It's gonna be a hard time because we're gonna fall on hard times for a while, but in the end, the brighter side will prevail.
Mm-hmm. What how important is it to be grateful, or how important is gratitude in having a healthy mindset?
Gratitude for me is always a healthy thing. It's one of the things I give people that I think deserve it. Like all these opportunities that I'm receiving right now, I'm very grateful for because I wasn't getting that when I first did podcasting. If
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah, but again, that kind of goes back to you don't know what's right around the corner, right?
right, exactly.
And I hear sometimes, because I think sometimes we hear, you've got to have gratitude, and I don't know if that people quite understand what that means. I think sometimes there's some folks that they'll latch on to a philosophy that's more of a fad rather than actually being grateful for what they have. You know what I mean? Like
Right,
they kind of get wrapped up in that.
yeah. But I try not to get wrapped up into it.
Hmm.
Like if the sun's shining, I'll be like, "Thank you for the sun shining." It's very small thing. You start your gratitude with very small things, and then you work your way up to the big things.
Yeah. What advice would you give somebody that is a, that is really dependent on social media Well, let me back up. Let me back up.
Okay.
Do you feel like, because we've talked about the pros and cons, like the pros of social media, I feel is you get to meet friends, you get to make genuine friends, and I always kind of wince a little bit when people say in real life versus online, because online is real life. These are real people you're
Right.
interacting with. These are real friends. But what would you say to somebody that maybe that are struggling with being online, where they might be a little bit too dependent on social media to validate themselves? What would you say to them?
Hmm. I would say give yourself breaks from your social media. Like some days I don't even post until it's like maybe an hour or two before showtime.
Hmm.
Like I give myself that break from social media. Even though it may look like I'm on my phone all the time, I'm just trying to get work done and
Yeah,
get work ideas for shows done and see if they like my ideas or not, if that makes sense.
absolutely, absolutely. And speaking of promotions, what you are promoting, you are all over the place now. I mean, look at you now. You're
Yep.
additional. additionally being a valued member of our Dynamite Download family. I mean, it's as well as when I know that Top Rope's Squishy's coming back soon.
Right.
We might find ourselves back in the hot seat really soon. You and I both. If for those of you that haven't heard of Top Rope Squishy, you got to check her out, because when she comes back, she puts her guests on in a series of very sinister questions.
Yes.
That it's dubbed the hot seat, so that's going to be pretty cool. But you're also working with your friend Devin, who's got several. I've actually subscribed to Devin's series of podcasts. You're doing your own solo on NASCAR. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I'm covering racing. As a lot of people don't know, they know my wrestling self, but know my racing self. So this is an opportunity to get me to know me better, and to just enjoy what I know about racing in general. We will be covering like we cover right now is the NASCAR at Trucks, Xfinity, and Cup Series. Then we're gonna move when Formula One comes. We're gonna be covering that because I'm a Formula One junkie as well. And I thought it'd be fun to cover some of the motorcycle racing, the MotoGP. So
yeah,
just branching out will be it's scary to do something yourself, but when you have such a positive person behind you, it's gonna get easier and easier and easier to do your show.
Yeah, and just that's the only way you get better is keep doing it. I mean, if you see my first episode of Mental Health Mondays, I mean, it was the good Reverend Warlock was very kind, but my mic wasn't working and things weren't set up the way it was supposed to. Okay, so a couple questions I have. One, what do you say to someone that tells you NASCAR is just a bunch of people making left turns? How do you change their mind and get them interested in NASCAR?
Well, I would say that's not true, because we do have road courses in NASCAR, and so that's not only left turns, but there's right turns.
Okay.
And if I hadn't watched a race, I would start with maybe watching Martinsville's race, because it's the smallest track on the circuit.
Okay. And what makes what makes it so interesting for you? Like, what, I mean, now for me, I hate to say it, but sometimes, and it's terrible that I feel this way, but for me, my main interest in ever watching a race is who's going to wreck. But I don't want to say that that's the reason to watch. Well, what really entices you and gets you jazzed about NASCAR to make you such a fan?
Well, since I've been following NASCAR since I was little, I was a huge fan when I was a little girl. My love from NASCAR come from both my uncles, my Uncle Richard and my Uncle Danny. And right before my Uncle Danny had passed from ALS, I got the opportunity to go to a truck series race here in Martinsville with him. So that will be a memory that I will always treasure.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's just, and two, I made so many friends with like NASCAR drivers, the crew. I mean,
It seems like it's a fandom that's hard to explain unless you experience it.
Right.
Similar to pro wrestling. Like I've had friends like Deb, my full tilt Deb, hated pro wrestling, would always badmouth it until she watched Full Gear 2019. And it was the Young Buck, I think it was the Young Bucks versus Lucha Brothers, hooked. And then it was the Moxley Omega match at the end, the unsanctioned.
Right.
Done. She was hooked. And now she's as big a mark as I am when it comes to that. But so like it does what also you mentioned too that I think is endearing is a lot of this stuff I think when you have those shared experiences, like you were talking about your uncles and how that impact how does that impact you as a fan knowing that you're having that connection? Do you still kind of feel that nostalgia or that feeling of connection?
Yes, I do actually, cause my uncle Richard, before he passed away of cancer, I got uh let's see, I got him and my dad tickets to go watch Monday Night Raw. And then basically 2 months later my uncle passed away.
Oh
So
wow.
that was a treasured memory I will hold deeply in my heart.
Wow.
Yes.
And I'm sure that was tremendous. They got to spend that time with you.
Yes.
Oh, that's so cool. And were they wrestling fans also? Was your uncle a wrestling fan?
Yes, he was. He was a big John Cena fan. So
Oh,
yeah,
very cool.
so yeah.
What fan that is kind of a advantage I think of social media is it does unite a lot of fandoms. You know, like people that don't in other areas like in locally you may not find people that have the same interest as you, but then you find a whole bunch of people online that have those interests. But on the flip side is there does seem to be, and this seems to be not just with fandom, but even with politics and a lot of things. Do you feel like sometimes people get a little bit aggressive with you've got to like the things I like or I hate you?
Yes, I do.
What where do you think causes that? Where do you think the origins for that are come from?
I think it's the way you're brought up in your upbringing, I think. And this go back to education.
Yeah.
So I taught in a not so good neighborhood for 8 years, but those are some of the best students I ever had, and they've grown up, and they still call me mama. So
Yep.
it's awesome when somebody's grown and still runs up and hugs you. It's just makes my day.
That's tremendous. That's how you know you've made a difference. Kids aren't going to remember what they scored on a test or if they passed the SOL or what they did on this. They're going to remember the connections, right?
Yes, it's a connection person.
What what do you, what's what, do you feel like we're being well, I don't want to say soft because I think do you feel like the education system is focused on the right things right now?
No, I don't. Like, okay, I still believe in my heart these kids need to be kids and they're not robots.
Mm-mm.
You're all right. Even in kindergarten, they have tests like every week,
It's insane.
like the benchmark test, and they should be having fun, not testing and not getting test anxiety. I've seen test anxiety in young kids too.
Yeah, kindergarten. Yeah, kindergartners shouldn't have they they have test anxiety. They the worst thing they need to worry about is knowing the difference between blue and red and purple
Right,
and being able to spell their name. You know what I mean? I
right,
but it almost feels like I mean, granted, there's a lot of I think political stuff going on, and I'm sure it's a money thing too. But it seems ridiculous that there's such pressure put on testing, yet we're pushing kids through who aren't prepared for life.
exactly.
Um, what are some skills do you think need to be taught that are being ignored in school in education?
Well, for instance, like when I was in school, we had home ec.
Mm,
So when we would learn how to sew, when we would learn how to cook, when we learn how to wash and dry clothes, I mean, that's everyday things that people don't understand.
Hmm.
And I think the education system has failed our children in doing that. Instead of, they should be teaching them life skills, and they're not.
Yeah, and how many of them can't? I mean, granted, we're now much more digital with our finances, but still
Hmm.
balancing on a bank account. You
Right.
know, I
Or
mean,
even writing in cursive, because I know they don't even teach that anymore.
well, it's. I think that one of the main reasons cursive's fallen off is kids are so used to typing. But here's what's funny is that a lot of kids aren't even used to this kind of typing. They're used to this kind of
Yeah.
typing, and emojis and text abbreviations, and that they don't even do that. And then like understanding credit,
Right.
understanding how a buy, a credit card or student loans, or I almost feel like a lot of this stuff we're not preparing our kids for when they get out into the world.
We're really not, and we're really giving them a disservice by not providing these services that they so badly need.
How would you, if you, all right, Queen Courtney, you just took over the education system in the United States. What's the first thing you're gonna, what are the first three things you're gonna do with your magic wand to change education?
The first three things I'm gonna do is make sure special education gets their funding.
Mm-hmm.
Only that, but make sure everybody is included in everything, because there are times where our education system fails our special education students and don't even try to put them in mainstream education to see how they interact with their peers.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, I would do change that of our education system.
What would you say to an educator or a parent or an administrator that fears putting a severely autistic or a severely behavior challenged student in with a regular classroom is going to disrupt the classroom and stop others from learning? What would you say to an individual that makes that comment?
I would say, if they're high, most the autistic students I know are high functioning, so
Mhm.
they're really intelligent, and maybe they're getting bored with their work.
That could be it.
Um, I would change, like, say the students like in first grade. I would challenge that student to give them maybe second or third grade work, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And so that's what I would do with that. And a lot of these kids aren't, they fall through the cracks, and they say it takes a village, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, speaking of takes a village, do you feel like the teacher to student ratio is fair, and do you think that maybe we need more specialists involved in pushing into classrooms to help these students, to help all students?
uh well, I would say the ratio to student teacher is not fitting, because normally you have about maybe 20 students per class in, like, kindergarten.
Hmm.
I've seen days where we have an influx of new students, and the class would get up to maybe in the 30s. So, they need
That's
their
insane.
aid to help with those students who struggle.
Yeah. I, and you're right about takes a village. I remember a student in my last school that all up to fourth grade, he would get into all kinds of trouble, and he was labeled a bad kid. And it wasn't until he got to fourth grade, and he wasn't even my student, but like one of
Mhm.
his friends was one of my students. And so I kind of teamed with his teacher she worked miracles. Like she worked miracles with this kid, and all it was just listening to, like making him feel valued.
Right.
Showing that he had value, because he was believing what they were telling him, that he was this bad kid, and he was so intelligent, so smart. He just didn't have, his life situation was
Mm-hmm.
abysmal. He had single mom that was barely home. She actually would go and leave the kids by themselves, but there was an over 18, one of the older sisters was over 18, so she kind of was responsible for them, but all she did was on her phone and whatever. But he had to survive, and he was kind of in this survival mentality, but he was believing that he was never going to amount to anything. And then he got to fourth grade, and my coworker and I just really tried to make him feel valued, and he started to see what was possible for him, to the point where he found value in going to school. It started to become a value for him.
Right.
And like, to me, I think we miss that. And I think sometimes accessibility is a problem. I think sometimes you have students that they don't have the accessibility to the things that will enrich their education around them. And the other
Right.
side is, I think we spend too much time trying to trying to put kids into different categories, rather than just trying to let them see what their value is. Am I making sense? Sorry to get on a soapbox, but
It's all about building the kid up. I,
mm-hmm,
I've had several cases where they said the kid was bad. The kid's not bad. They're really smart, and like I said, they might be getting bored with what you're teaching them. If you would just take that extra step to make them see that their education, and not only their education is a value, but themselves is a value too.
well, I'm with you there, except then we get into who takes that extra step, because you've got a teacher who's
Mm-hmm.
already got so much on his or her plate, that and now that and again, differentiation, that's part of the job. But at what point do you need to bring in specialists to help a teacher who's already being now? Again, some of this is administrative stuff that's
Right.
on their plate. At what point do we call to the rest of the village, instead of just the teacher responsible for giving these students what they need?
I think, and like you said, I think it comes down to team teaching is what
Mm-hmm.
you did. So a lot of us would team teach when I was in the education system. I would have a group, like the kids who couldn't read very good, so I would end up
Mm-hmm.
teaching them how to like read or sound out words. It's not just about testing the student.
Mm-hmm.
It's letting them learn who they are as they grow up, I think.
Exactly. What about, how do we make sure kids, when they grow up, how do we make sure they don't fall for misinformation online?
I would say I would wait, and I would not give my child a phone until like they're maybe high school age, to protect them that way. But then, you know, you have these friends who have phones when they're
Mhm.
like in fifth grade, and they're looking up stuff they shouldn't have. But
And sharing stuff, yeah.
yeah, it's very difficult, like, because I see it as a teacher standpoint. I also see it as like a a potential parent point too.
What's the solution then? Like, I mean, let's be honest. We were kids.
Yeah,
You say don't look in the cookie jar. What are we gonna do? We're gonna
look,
want to look in the cookie jar. Exactly. So, like, and I feel like sometimes we get away from critical thinking. We get away from scientific inquiry. One of the things that one of the reasons I became a teacher was I wanted kids to realize that their hypothesis wasn't their identity. And
Right.
like a lot of times they like, I think this is something a lot of adults have a problem with, is they'll get an idea in their head and that becomes part of their identity. So then if new data comes around that challenges their perspective, their belief, or their hypothesis,
Right.
then it also they're much more stubborn and reluctant to change their mind because it's also changing their identity. Do you see that as something we should look at? Or
I think we should look at it because it not only teaching like the kid value in themselves,
Mhm.
also teaching them not to take everything to heart that they read on the interweb.
Yeah. And not to I mean, it's a different world. When I was growing up, if something if you peed your pants in the cafeteria, only the kids in the cafeteria knew about it. But
Right.
now if you pee your pants in the cafeteria, you're on TikTok and there's like a million there's a million people in the world that see it. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a tough thing. Well, what you've got so much going on. How do you keep yourself sane with all these podcasts? I mean, how do you keep yourself in touch with the common folk now? Now that you're this internet celebrity, that you're on all these podcasts and doing your own podcast, how do you keep yourself humble, Courtney?
I try to stay true. I always stay true to who I am, and I also give my honest opinion. Some people might not like it, but we agree to disagree, and you know, it's just about being who you are, being true to yourself. If
Yep,
that
exactly. Now, granted, I think I would argue that the mega heel Courtney that is involved with wrestling isn't necessarily a fake version of you. I think it's an enhanced heel persona, but that's what they all say. That's what MJF and everybody says is you take who you are, you embellish or enhance it to be that character. But what you say doesn't seem to be what you say seems to be your true beliefs.
it is, it really is my true beliefs. Like, um, I just fall in love with these heel characters. So you know what I'm saying.
Oh,
Like,
I do. Yeah.
so I prefer rooting for the heel over the baby face. But hey, some say I might have turned a certain somebody into a heel while she was on the show.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Well, now we'll get to that another time, I'm sure.
Yeah,
But and sometimes like for me, I'm kind of like a Moxley, where I can kind of root for the villain or the face. I can kind of go both ways. Depending on who's wrestling. But what are some things you got coming up that you're excited about? You want to share with everybody?
um, okay, things I'm excited about. We have our Reacher Roger on tonight at 10 p.m. on Devon the Travel Chief.
Nice.
It's episodes 5 and 6, or it might be
Is
four,
this season 1 or 2?
season 1. But I
Season.
already binge watched one, and I'm on season 2 now.
Well, we're actually Deb and I are watching season 2 now. We love season 1. I mean, I'm not familiar with the books, and I didn't watch the Tom Cruise movies, but from my understanding is the actor they've got playing Reacher in this series is much closer to who the character in the book is supposed to be.
Right.
And this guy Reacher does not play around.
Mister does not mess around.
And I love the female deputy,
Ross,
uh Roscoe.
yes,
She's awesome. She's another one that doesn't play. And I like Finley also. I think that the three of
yeah,
them are a good dynamic, and I don't want to spoil anybody for
no,
Reacher, but I highly recommend, not only recommend the show, but I recommend the watch along tonight. Is it Sunday night, 10 o'clock?
Sunday nights at 10 o'clock, and then on Tuesday at 9 p.m. is where you can find the driver's seat hosted by yours truly, the
Now,
wonderful Courtney.
yes. Now I got one question. When you're in the driver's seat, do you swerve when you drive?
I swerve when I drive.
Drive. Swerve when I drive. Swerve when I drive. There it is. And you may also catch Courtney occasionally on certain special episodes of Dynamite Download. I know that as we get closer to Mission Pro Wrestling, they've got their big main event. This is going to be like their big show, the Mission Pro Mania. Courtney might be jumping on, and there might be another person, a friend of ours, that jump on with us too when she's feeling more up to it. And maybe we'll put her in the hot seat.
Oh, that would be
flip it back on her. Hey, guess what? Courtney and I are going to put you in the hot seat. It's your turn. Swerve. That's the swerve.
That is a perfect swerve.
Well, Courtney, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad I was able to get you on. And anything more than a fortune cookie that you'd like, any wisdom you'd like to give to the listeners out there?
I'm just gonna say this. I'm always here to brighten up your day with a smile or a joke. If you need something, please hit us up on social media. And if I don't know you, I will get to know you. And we'll start a friendship, and then we'll go from there.
Awesome. And I'm here to vouch for Courtney. She's good people. Reach out to her. She will give you more than the time of day. All right. Well, on behalf of Courtney, a.k.a. the Scully to my Mulder, this is Mind Runner. Thank you for listening to Mental Health Mondays, and we'll see you next time. Go give yourself some credit. You are human, but be genuine to yourself. Always remember, you are not alone. Catch full episodes every Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific.